For my entire life, I was the responsible one in my family. The quiet one who worked hard while my sister, the golden child, charmed her way through life. So I did what the responsible one does. I poured 10 years of blood, sweat, and savings into building my dream home. A luxury villa on a hill, my sanctuary, my masterpiece. The day before my housewarming party, I arrived to find my sister there, directing florists and planners. She smiled, champagne in hand, and announced that my villa was her wedding venue and her new home. Dad promised it to her, my mother said, telling me not to be selfish. They thought I would just cry and walk away. They forgot one thing about the responsible one. I keep all the receipts. Will I get my house back? Oh, it's going to be so much more satisfying than that. Follow along with the story of my ultimate family revenge. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single chapter. Smash that like button if you're ready for the drama to unfold. And let me know where you're reading from in the comments below. I'd love to see what cities are on Team Amelia. The air in the house still smelled of potential. It was a complex perfume of fresh paint, the clean, piney scent of sawdust from the last of the trim being installed, and the faint, earthy aroma of curing grout. I ran my hand over the vast, cool expanse of the Carrara marble island that dominated the kitchen. It was flawlessly white, shot through with veins of soft gray that looked like captured lightning. I had waited 7 months for this specific slab to be shipped from Italy, rejecting a dozen lesser options because this one had character. This house was my dissertation on self-reliance. For 10 years, I had worked 60-hour weeks in the cutthroat world of private equity. While my peers were buying luxury cars and taking lavish vacations to Mykonos, I was maxing out my 401k, investing my bonuses in low-cost index funds, and driving a 10-year-old Toyota. My indulgence wasn't designer bags. It was a high-yield savings account I'd nicknamed the Foundation. Every square foot of this place was a testament to a skipped brunch, a night spent working late, a vacation postponed. I had designed the layout myself on a consumer-grade architecture program, then paid a professional to make it structurally sound. The reading nook carved into the wall of the main living space, with its wide window perfectly positioned to catch the morning sun. The walk-in pantry with floor-to-ceiling shelves, a secret dream for the baker I was on weekends. The master bathroom featured a rainfall shower head and a freestanding tub that looked out onto the dense woods behind the property. It was more than a house. It was a sanctuary I had built, brick by painful brick, far from the suffocating orbit of my family. My housewarming was in 3 days. The digital invitations, featuring a tasteful photo of the villa's modern cedar and glass exterior, had gone out a month ago. The caterers were booked, a local company renowned for their artisanal cheese boards. My best friend, Chloe, was flying in from Chicago tomorrow. For the first time in my 32 years, I felt like I was about to host an event that was unequivocally and entirely about me. I walked through the sliding glass doors onto the expansive back deck. The composite boards were still warm from the afternoon sun. I leaned against the sleek black iron railing, gazing out at the panorama of rolling hills, their green slopes darkening to purple in the late-day haze. A profound sense of peace washed over me, a feeling so complete it was almost unnerving. This was the quiet I had been working for, the solitude I had craved. This was the tangible result of 1,000 silent sacrifices. This was mine. Every nail, every wire, every single brick was mine. Peace, I've learned, is a fragile state, easily shattered by the buzz of a cell phone. I pulled my phone from the back pocket of my jeans. A string of texts had come in while I'd been blissfully disconnected. Most were from Chloe, a series of excited emojis and exclamation points about her flight. But one was from my sister, Jessica. Jessie Sparkles. OMG, saw the latest pics of the house on Mom's phone. It's to die for. We have to talk soon. Big news. Hugs and kisses. A familiar, acidic unease churned in my stomach. To understand that feeling, you have to understand my sister. Jessica was born bathed in a golden light that never seemed to dim. She was the sun. I was the planetoid in her distant orbit, occasionally noticed but never the center of the system. She had a laugh that could charm cash out of a wallet and tears that could melt the resolve of the sternest teacher. She failed her driver's test 3 times, but on her 16th birthday, a new BMW sat in the driveway, a giant red bow on the hood. I had aced mine on the first try and was handed the keys to our mother's decade-old minivan to run family errands. Our childhood was a long highlight reel of her triumphs and my footnotes. The year I won the state-level mathematics decathlon, my parents left the award ceremony early because Jessica had a sore throat and needed to be home for her dance recital the next day. The recital, not the competition, was the lead story at the dinner table for the next week. When I graduated from Penn with honors, my graduation party was a shared affair with Jessica, who was celebrating getting a C+ in a pottery class she'd almost failed. It wasn't that they were cruel. It was something more insidious. They simply didn't see me. I was the responsible one, the quiet one, the one who didn't need the attention because I was always fine. Amelia will be fine. It became the family motto for my existence. This house was supposed to be my declaration that I was more than just fine. The text message was classic Jessica, all breathless excitement and a vague, self-important promise of big news. Her recent engagement to a perfectly pleasant, trust fund fiancé named David was her latest and greatest production. I thought back to a phone call with my mother last week. I'd been trying to tell her about the reclaimed barn wood I'd sourced for the fireplace mantel, my voice buzzing with excitement. "That's nice, honey," she'd said, her tone distracted. "Now, tell me again about the guest wing. How many bathrooms does it have? And the patio, you said it could seat how many for dinner? Is the driveway completely paved now? You know how your father worries about dust on his car." Her questions felt less like interest and more like an inventory. At the time, I dismissed it as my mother's typical social calculus, always measuring things in terms of their capacity for entertaining. Now, reading Jessica's text, my mother's questions echoed with a strange, new resonance. I typed back a non-committal reply. "Me, glad you like it. Let's catch up after the housewarming. Things are crazy right now. Jessie. Oh, it'll have to be before then. You'll see." The winky face emoji felt less like a playful gesture and more like a tiny, glittering threat. The next day, the air was thick with the smell of mulch and freshly turned earth. I stood with the head landscaper, pointing out where the hydrangeas should go to flank the stone walkway. I wanted guests at my housewarming to feel welcomed by blooms, to walk a path of blues and purples toward the front door. My phone rang, and Chloe's smiling face popped up on the screen. "Please tell me you're standing on the deck of your magnificent palace, sipping champagne and lording it over the common folk," she said, her voice crackling with energy. I laughed, a genuine, happy sound. "Not quite. I'm directing mulch placement. The glamour is overwhelming." "Well, get ready for more glamour, because I just boarded. I'll be there by 5. Are you ready for Hurricane Jessica to make her grand entrance this weekend?" I sighed, kicking at a loose clump of dirt with the toe of my boot. "She's engaged, Chloe. She has her own life, her own drama to direct. I really think, for once, this can just be about me and the house." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Famous last words, Leah," Chloe said, her voice softer now. "You know I'm your biggest fan, and I think that house is a monument to your awesomeness. Just keep your head on a swivel. Your family has a black belt in making everything about her." We hung up, and the landscaper asked me about outdoor lighting. As if on cue, my dad called. "Amelia. Just calling to check in," he started, his voice a little too breezy. "Your mother and I are just so thrilled for you. This house, what an accomplishment." "Thanks, Dad. It's really coming together. Say, I was thinking about the party. What's the power grid like up there?" "Pretty robust." It was an odd question. "I guess. It's a new construction, Dad. Everything is up to code." "Why?" "Oh, no reason, no reason. Just thinking, if you ever had a big event. A band, maybe. A lot of outdoor lighting. You'd need a lot of juice for that. Just thinking ahead." I rolled my eyes, attributing it to his chronic over-planning. It'll handle a stereo system and some string lights, Dad. It's a housewarming, not a rock concert. He chuckled. Right. Of course. Well, see you Saturday. He hung up, leaving me with a faint trail of unease. It felt like everyone was talking about my house in terms of a scale I hadn't planned for. An hour later, as I was signing off on the landscaping invoice, my phone rang again. An unknown number with a local area code. Hi, is this Amelia Gable? A cheerful female voice asked. This is she. Hi Amelia, this is Sarah from Elegant Edibles Catering. I'm so sorry to bother you. I just have a quick question about your event on Saturday. Sure, what's up? I'm just trying to finalize the order, and I wanted to confirm the menu switch from the hors d'oeuvres and cocktail package to the full-service wedding reception buffet for 150 guests. The world tilted slightly. I gripped the phone tighter, my knuckles turning white. I'm sorry, what? A wedding reception? Yes, Sarah said, a hint of confusion in her own voice now. Your mother's assistant called yesterday to upgrade the package. She mentioned it was for your sister's wedding and that you were generously hosting. I just needed to confirm the head count. My blood ran cold. My mother doesn't have an assistant, I said slowly, my voice feeling disconnected from my body. And I am not hosting a wedding. I'm hosting a housewarming party for 50 people. Oh. Sarah sounded mortified. Oh my God, I am so sorry. There must have been a terrible crossed wire. Maybe she meant another client. Please, disregard. My sincerest apologies. We will, of course, stick to the original plan. We'll see you Saturday for the housewarming. She hung up, leaving me standing in the driveway, the smell of mulch suddenly cloying and suffocating. A crossed wire. A mistake. That's what it was. It had to be. But the carefully constructed peace I had felt just yesterday was gone, replaced by a knot of dread, cold and heavy in the pit of my stomach. The following afternoon, the day before my party, I drove up the long, winding road to the villa for what was supposed to be the last time before my new life officially began. I'd packed a box with the essentials for my first overnight stay: my favorite coffee beans, a well-worn copy of Pride and Prejudice, a bottle of champagne to chill, and the set of ridiculously expensive linen sheets I'd bought as a final present to myself. Despite the gnawing anxiety from the caterer's call, I was trying to reclaim my excitement. The sun was bright, the sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue, and from a distance, the house looked exactly as I had dreamed it. The illusion shattered the moment I turned into my driveway. Parked near the front steps was a pristine white van. Emblazoned on its side in flowing cursive script were the words, Blooms and Bows Wedding Planners. My first thought was a desperate one. They have the wrong address. They must be looking for the old Henderson estate on the next ridge over. I parked my car and got out, the box of my belongings feeling suddenly foolish and heavy in my arms. The front door, which I had locked myself the day before, was slightly ajar. I pushed it open, and the scent hit me first. It wasn't my new house smell anymore. It was the overpowering, almost funereal perfume of thousands of flowers. White roses, to be exact. The foyer was unrecognizable. My minimalist entryway, meant to be graced by a single piece of art, was choked with them. Garlands of roses and eucalyptus were being draped over the custom iron staircase I'd spent weeks designing. Two strangers were unrolling a long white aisle runner across the Italian tile I'd painstakingly chosen. And in the center of it all, directing the chaos like a seasoned general, was my sister. Jessica was radiant. She wore a white sundress and wedges, a glass of champagne held delicately in one hand. Her blonde hair was swept up in an elegant, messy bun, and she was pointing toward the grand archway that led to the living room. No, she was saying to a harried-looking woman with a clipboard. The main floral arch needs to be there. That's where David and I will say our vows. The view of the hills will be the backdrop. She hadn't seen me yet. I stood frozen in the doorway, the box in my arms, a silent, invisible ghost in my own home. For a moment, My brain simply refused to process the scene. It was a movie set. A prank. A bizarre dream from which I would soon awake. Then Jessica turned, a brilliant smile on her face as she prepared to issue another command. Her eyes landed on me. The smile didn't falter. It didn't change into a look of guilt or surprise. It simply broadened, as if I were a welcome, expected part of the scenery. "Leah!" she exclaimed, her voice echoing in the high-ceilinged space. "You're here. What do you think?" She gestured with her champagne glass, a sweeping motion that encompassed the entire desecrated foyer. "Do the roses scream rustic elegance, or what?" The box of my belongings slipped from my numb fingers, thudding onto the tile floor. The sound was flat and dead in the floral-scented air. "Jessica," I said, my voice a dry whisper. "What is this? What is going on?" She let out a light, tinkling laugh, the one she always used when she thought someone was being silly and dramatic. She glided toward me, her sandals clicking on the floor. "Silly. It's my wedding. We moved the date up. David's family was able to fly in from London on short notice, and everything just fell into place. It was meant to be." She took a sip of her champagne, her eyes sparkling. I stared at her, at the absolute, unwavering certainty on her beautiful face. My mind was a maelstrom of confusion and rising horror. The wedding planner, the caterer, my parents' strange questions, it all coalesced into a monstrous, unbelievable truth. "Your wedding," I repeated slowly. "Here." "Well, of course here," she said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. She gestured grandly again, this time encompassing the entire house. "And our new house, of course. It's the most incredible wedding gift." The words hit me with the force of a physical blow. I felt the air leave my lungs. "Wedding gift?" I choked out. "Jessica, what are you talking about? I built this house. This is my house." A flicker of annoyance crossed her features, the first crack in her serene facade. "Don't be so pedantic, Leah. It's a figure of speech." "It is not a figure of speech." My voice was rising, trembling with a rage so profound it felt like it would tear me apart. "I paid for this. Every window, every floorboard. My name is on the deed." Just then, the front door swung open again. My parents walked in, my mother in a chic linen pantsuit and my father in a crisp polo shirt. They took in the scene, Jessica looking annoyed, me looking thunderous, the wedding preparations in full swing, and their faces settled into masks of calm, practiced resolution. They were not here as reinforcements. They were here as handlers. "Amelia, honey," my mother said, walking over and placing a cool hand on my arm. Her touch felt like a brand. "Let's not make a scene. Your sister is so happy." "A scene?" I pulled my arm away as if I'd been burned. "Mom, she's telling me you gave her my house." My father cleared his throat, refusing to meet my eyes. He stared at a point on the wall just over my shoulder. "Now, it wasn't exactly like that. There was a misunderstanding." "What misunderstanding?" I demanded, turning on him. "I built this house with my own money. Money I earned from the job you always said was too demanding for a young woman. You have no right to give it away." "I might have, mentioned it to her," he mumbled, his voice cowardly and weak. "I might have promised her she could have it. She was so stressed about the wedding, finding a venue, a place to live. I was just trying to help." He finally looked at me, his expression pleading. "It's just a house, Amelia. You're the smart one. The resourceful one. You can always build another." The casual cruelty of his words stole my breath. "You can always build another." As if it were a Lego set I could simply reassemble. As if the 10 years of my life I had poured into this were nothing. "I want you all out," I said, my voice dangerously low. "The wedding planners, the florists. You, Mom, Dad. And you, Jessica. Get out of my house. Now." Jessica's face hardened. The beautiful bride vanished, replaced by the spoiled child who had been denied her prize. "You can't talk to us like that. You're going to ruin my wedding day." "This isn't your wedding day," I seethed. "And this isn't your house." I turned to the wedding planner, who was watching the family drama with wide, horrified eyes. "You need to leave." "My apologies, but there is no wedding happening here." "Amelia, stop this at once," my mother commanded, her voice sharp. "You are being incredibly selfish." She stepped forward, her eyes cold. "Now, give Jessica the keys. All of them. The one for the front door, the garage, the service entrance. We're having the locks changed in the morning for security anyway, but we need them for tonight." I stared at her, at the mother who was demanding I hand over the keys to my own life, my own dream, to her favored child. I felt a snap deep inside me, the sound of the last frayed tether of familial duty breaking for good. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just stared at the three of them, my supposed family, who stood as strangers in my foyer. My mother let out an exasperated sigh, the sound of a woman deeply inconvenienced. She delivered the final, fatal blow, her words laced with a lifetime of dismissive judgment. "Don't be selfish, Amelia. We're your family." They turned their backs on me then. The three of them. They walked past the roses, toward the living room, my father putting a comforting arm around Jessica's shoulders. They walked back into my house to continue planning a party for a life that wasn't theirs. I was left standing alone in the driveway. The heavy front door swung shut with a soft, definitive click. A moment later, I heard the sound of the deadbolt sliding into place, locking me out. The betrayal was no longer a whisper or a fear. It was a solid, finished thing. And I was standing on the wrong side of it. I don't remember the drive. I must have obeyed traffic laws, stopped at stop signs, used my turn signals. My body knew how to operate a vehicle, even when my mind had completely fractured. Trees and houses and streetlights smeared past my window in a meaningless green and gray blur. My only conscious thought was to keep driving away from the house on the hill, away from the scent of stolen roses and shattered dreams. I ended up at a Marriott off the interstate, a place so utterly devoid of personality it felt safe. The room was a symphony of beige and brown. The art on the wall was a generic print of a sailboat. It was the kind of room people passed through without a thought, a place for forgotten memories, which felt grimly appropriate. I sat on the edge of the stiff, tightly made bed and the silence was deafening. Then the dam broke. It wasn't a loud, theatrical sobbing. It was a silent, convulsive grief that racked my entire body. Tears streamed down my face, hot and furious. Every breath was a painful hitch in my chest. This wasn't just about a house. It was about the definitive, undeniable death of a hope I hadn't even realized I was still clinging to. The hope that one day, my family would finally see me. My father's words echoed in the sterile room, each one a fresh stab of betrayal. "You're the smart one. The resourceful one. You can always build another." He wasn't complimenting my strength. He was weaponizing it against me. My competence was their license to dismiss me. My self-sufficiency was their excuse to neglect me. I had worked so hard to become independent, and they had punished me for it by deciding I didn't need the things that mattered: respect, recognition, a place to call my own. I curled up on the bed, the cheap polyester comforter rough against my cheek. I replayed my life in a horrifyingly clear montage. The time I'd gotten a promotion to senior analyst, and my mother's only response was, "Oh, that's nice, dear. Did I tell you Jessica just got cast as the lead in a community theater play?" The time I'd put the down payment on the land, and my father had patted my arm and said, "Don't overextend yourself, Amelia. It's a lot for a single girl to handle." They hadn't been expressing concern. They had been expressing disbelief that I was capable of something so far beyond their limited perception of me. The tears eventually slowed, leaving behind a hollow, aching exhaustion. The grief remained, a cold stone in my gut, but something else was beginning to crystallize around it: rage. A pure, cold, diamond-hard rage. They hadn't just taken something from me. They had stolen it. They were thieves, cloaked in the guise of family, and they had committed the perfect crime, assuming I would be too nice, too responsible, to fight back. They assumed I would just be fine. As I lay there, hollowed out and raw, my phone, which I'd tossed onto the nightstand, lit up with an email notification. I numbly reached for it, expecting it to be a receipt for the hotel room. The subject line punched the air from my lungs. Subject: a joyful update. Change of venue and housewarming for Jessica and David. It was from Jessica's future mother-in-law, a woman named Eleanor Vance. It had been sent to a massive distribution list. With trembling fingers, I opened it. Dearest friends and family, the email began, full of cheerful, bubbly prose. In a wonderful and spontaneous turn of events, Jessica and David have decided to host their wedding ceremony at their magnificent new home. Her incredibly generous parents have gifted them the stunning villa at 1140 Summit Ridge, and they are so excited to combine their wedding with their housewarming. Please disregard the previous venue information and join us this Saturday to celebrate the happy couple as they begin their new life in their new home. See you there. They had stolen my house, and now they were stealing my party, my guest list, my very identity as the homeowner. They weren't just erasing me, they were pasting Jessica's smiling face over my own. The cold stone of grief in my gut ignited. It was no longer a stone. It was a furnace. And my tears were finally, blessedly, dry. I checked out of the hotel before sunrise. The fury had burned away the fog of grief, leaving behind a stark, crystalline purpose. I drove not aimlessly, but with the precision of a predator, heading straight for my apartment. My real home, my current base of operations. My apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt like a barracks. I bypassed the kitchen, ignored the blinking light on my answering machine. I walked directly to the closet in my small home office and pulled a heavy banker's box from the top shelf. The label, written in my own neat print, read, Villa Project, Deed/Financial/Legal. This wasn't a box of memories. This was an arsenal. I heaved it onto my dining room table, the wood groaning under the weight. I flipped open the lid. Inside, nestled in dozens of neatly organized folders, was the paper trail of my life for the past 3 years. It was the story of my dream, told in the irrefutable language of contracts and numbers. I pulled out the first folder. The deed. I ran my thumb over my own name, the stark, legal finality of it. Amelia Gable, an unmarried woman. Not the Gable family. Not Jessica Gable. Mine. Next came the loan documents from the bank. I spread the pages out on the table. The numbers were staggering, a multi-million-dollar mortgage that I, and I alone, had been approved for based on my own credit, my own income, my own reputation. My signature was on every page, a binding promise that I was solely responsible for this monumental debt. My father hadn't co-signed. He hadn't put up a single dollar as collateral. His only contribution had been useless, patronizing advice. I pulled out the architectural plans. The original sketches I had doodled on napkins, the professional blueprints with their crisp, blue lines. My name was in the title block on every single page. Client, Amelia Gable. Then I got to the core of it all. The invoices. The receipts. I pulled them out, folder after folder. The wire transfer for the land purchase. The contract with the construction firm. Invoices from the electrician, the plumber, the drywall installers, the roofers. Receipts from Ferguson for the plumbing fixtures, from Restoration Hardware for the lighting, from the quarry in Vermont for the stone on the fireplace. Page after page after page, each one detailing a payment made from a single source. My bank account. It was a mountain of proof. A paper fortress. Finally, at the very bottom of the last folder, I found the most important document of all. It was the final invoice from the construction company, stamped in red, paid in full. I had made the final, 6-figure wire transfer just last week. On the memo line of the transfer confirmation, I had typed 2 words, a small, private celebration of the moment. It read, Dream Home. I stared at that memo, and my resolve hardened from diamond into something infinitely stronger. This wasn't just about business. It was about my life's work. I didn't just look at the documents. I walked to my all-in-one printer in the corner of the room. I lifted the lid, placed the deed on the glass, and pressed the copy button. The machine whirred to life, a low hum that filled the silent apartment. It was the sound of my war machine churning to life. I copied the deed, the loan agreement, the final invoice. Then I did it again. And again. I wasn't just collecting proof. I was preparing it for distribution. By 9 a.m., my dining table looked less like a place to eat and more like the frantic headquarters of a legal team preparing for a hostile takeover. Copies of documents were sorted into neat piles. My laptop was open, displaying the damning email from Eleanor Vance. I had the facts. I had the fury. But I knew, with absolute certainty, that I couldn't go into this battle alone. I needed my second-in-command. I dialed Chloe's number. She picked up on the second ring. Leah. I was just about to text you. My flight was early. I just landed at O'Hare to grab my connection. I'll be there by 2. Are you ready to pop the champagne? I took a deep breath. My voice, when it came out, was unervingly calm. It didn't tremble. It didn't crack. It was the voice of a CEO announcing a hostile downsizing. Change of plans. The housewarming is off. What? Why? Did the plumbing explode? Worse, I said. My family staged a coup. I told her everything. I started with Jessica's text and ended with the deadbolt clicking shut. I relayed the conversations, the gaslighting, my father's gutless excuse, my mother's cold command to hand over the keys. I spoke in a flat monotone, reciting the facts as if they had happened to someone else. When I finished, the silence on the other end of the line was so complete I thought the call had dropped. Chloe. That absolute bitch, she finally hissed, her voice a low snarl. No, not just her. All of them. Amelia, I'm getting on the next flight out. I don't care where it goes. I'll rent a car. Text me your address. I'm coming now. I'm not at the villa. I'm at my apartment. Good, she said. Secure the base. I'll be there in 3 hours. True to her word, Chloe arrived looking like a storm cloud in a designer jacket, pulling a carry-on behind her. She took one look at the documents spread across my table, at my pale, set face, and dropped her bag. Okay, she said, her marketing strategist brain kicking into high gear. This is a hostile brand seizure. They've stolen your asset and are trying to control the narrative. Our job is to launch a counter-campaign that completely demolishes theirs. My apartment became our war room. She grabbed a notepad and a pen from my desk. What's the objective? I want my house back, I said simply. Wrong, she countered, not unkindly. That's the result. The objective is public vindication. Filing a lawsuit is slow. It's private. By the time it's settled, the story will be that you cruelly sued your own sister over a simple misunderstanding. They've already framed you as the villain. We need to reframe you as the victim of a calculated, premeditated theft. And we need to do it in front of the very audience they're trying to impress. She pointed her pen at me. You don't send a cease and desist letter to their lawyer. You deliver it yourself. In person. During the ceremony. The idea was terrifying and exhilarating. You mean, crash the wedding? Chloe's smile was sharp and devoid of humor. It was the smile of a predator. Crash it. Honey, no. You're the rightful owner of the venue. You're not crashing anything. You're making an official site inspection and shutting down an unauthorized event. The plan began to take shape, moving from a vague emotional desire for revenge into a concrete, tactical operation. We would let them proceed. We would let them gather their friends, their family, their entire social circle, into one convenient location. We would let them stand up in front of everyone and bask in the glory of their new life, their new house. And then, at the moment of their highest triumph, I would burn it all to the ground with the cold, hard truth. Chloe looked at me, her eyes shining with righteous fire. Don't just win the battle, Amelia, she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Win the whole damn war. And make sure there are witnesses. The next 24 hours were a masterclass in controlled duplicity. Under Chloe's expert guidance, I shifted from defense to offense. My first target was the unwitting accomplice, the wedding planner. I found her number on the Blooms and Bows website. I took a deep breath, pictured Jessica's breezy, self-absorbed charm, and dialed. Blooms and Bows, this is Tiffany, a professional voice chirped. Hi Tiffany, it's Amelia Gable, Jessica's sister, I said, injecting a warm, slightly flustered tone into my voice. Oh my gosh, I am so sorry about all the confusion at the house yesterday. My family is just delightfully chaotic, you know how it is. Oh, Ms. Gable, of course. No problem at all, she said, sounding relieved. I just feel terrible about the mix-up, and I wanted to do something special for them, I continued, laying it on thick. I'm putting together a last-minute surprise slideshow for them. I was wondering, could you possibly email me the final guest list? I just want to make sure I don't leave out any of David's important family friends. I would be mortified. Of course. That's so sweet of you. I can send that right over. You're a lifesaver. I gushed. Oh, one last thing. The videographer you have booked. Do you know if they'll have multiple cameras? I'd love to make sure they get a really good clear shot when my parents officially gift the house to Jessica and David during the ceremony. It's going to be such an emotional moment. I want it captured perfectly. There was a pause. That's a great thought. Yes, they'll have 2 cameras, one focused on the couple and one for wider shots of the guests and the setting. I'll make a note to have them focus on the gift-giving portion. Perfect, I said, my voice dripping with fake sincerity. You're the best. Thank you. I hung up and looked at Chloe, who gave me a slow, approving nod. Phase 1 was complete. I now had my target list, and I had confirmation that my evidence would be recorded for posterity. Phase 2 was activating the network. I scrolled through the guest list Tiffany had just emailed me. I identified 2 key relatives. First, my Aunt Carol, my mother's sister, a woman who moved gossip through the family faster than the speed of light. Second, my Uncle Robert, my father's younger brother, a retired lawyer and the only person in the family who valued fairness over appearances. I drafted 2 separate but similar emails. To Aunt Carol. Subject: So worried about Jessie. Hi Aunt Carol. Hope you're well. So excited to see you at the wedding Saturday. Things have been so hectic. I'm a little worried about Jessie and David, to be honest. That new villa is absolutely magnificent, but I had no idea they could afford something like that. I know they're saying it's a gift, but I just hope they haven't overextended themselves to keep up appearances. It must be costing them a fortune to host everyone there. So stressful. Love. Amelia. To Uncle Robert. Subject: Quick question. Hi Uncle Robert, I hope this email finds you well. I'm looking forward to seeing you this weekend. I had a quick, slightly awkward question, and I was hoping your legal mind could offer some perspective. Dad mentioned to me that he was helping Jessica out by letting her use the new villa on Summit Ridge for her wedding. But now I'm hearing from others that he gifted her the entire property. I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding, but that seems like an incredibly complex and taxable transaction to complete in a matter of days. Is everything all right? Best. Amelia. I hit send on both. Chloe and I watched the screen as if we were waiting for election results. It took less than an hour for the first reply to come in. It was from Uncle Robert. Amelia, his email read. Your father told me he was helping her out with the venue, but he made it sound like he was simply renting it for the day. A full transfer of a multi-million-dollar property is an entirely different matter. Something here doesn't add up. Are you okay? I smiled, a real, sharp-edged smile. The seeds were not just planted. They were beginning to sprout. The morning of the wedding arrived with a pearly grey dawn. I hadn't slept. I hadn't even tried. Sleep was a luxury for people at peace, and I was a woman at war. My preparation began not with panic, but with a strange monastic calm. Chloe had ordered breakfast, but I only drank black coffee. Then, I left her in my apartment, which now looked like a campaign headquarters on election night, and I went to a spa. It wasn't an indulgence. It was a strategic necessity. I sat in the steam room until my pores opened and my mind cleared. I had a 90-minute deep tissue massage, where the therapist worked the knots of grief and anxiety out of my shoulders one by one. I had my hair professionally blown out, not in soft, celebratory waves, but in a sleek, severe style that fell like a sheet of dark silk. I had my makeup done, my eyes subtly defined, my lips painted a neutral, serious shade. This was not the face of a guest. It was the face of a woman who was there to conduct business. Back at the apartment, I laid out my uniform. Not a dress. Never a dress. I had chosen an Armani power suit. The jacket was exquisitely tailored with sharp, padded shoulders. The trousers cut with a clean, severe line. The color was a deep, unforgiving charcoal gray. Beneath it, I wore a simple black silk shell. It was armor. It was a statement. I was not the heartbroken sister. I was not the family ghost. I was an executive arriving to liquidate a fraudulent asset. My final act of preparation was the most important. I took the pristine copies of my evidence, the deed, the loan summary, the final paid invoice, and slid them into a slim black leather briefcase. It felt solid and heavy in my hand, a counterweight to the hollowness in my chest. Dressed and ready, I stood before the full-length mirror in my bedroom. The woman looking back at me was a stranger. Her eyes, the same ones that had shed so many tears in that beige hotel room, were now clear and hard as flint. The slump of the victim was gone, replaced by a ramrod-straight posture. There were shadows of exhaustion under the expensive concealer, but they were eclipsed by the fierce, burning light of her resolve. I gave her a single, sharp nod. Chloe stood in the doorway, holding my car keys. She didn't offer words of encouragement. She didn't need to. She simply handed me the keys, her expression a mix of awe and ferocious pride. I walked out of my apartment, my heels clicking a steady, resolute rhythm on the hardwood floor. In the car, I placed the leather briefcase carefully on the passenger seat beside me. The engine turned over with a low, powerful growl. I took one last, deep breath, my hands steady on the steering wheel. I pulled out my phone and sent a single text to Chloe. It's time. I pulled out into the street and aimed the car toward the hills. I drove not with fear, not with anger, not even with sadness. I drove with the profound, icy calm of a person who has lost everything, and therefore has absolutely nothing left to lose. I was a force of nature, a coming storm, and I was heading directly for the house I had built. The sun was beginning its slow, golden descent, casting long shadows across the immaculate lawn. The scene was exactly as Jessica would have designed it, a perfect, Instagrammable fantasy. Rows of white chairs faced a magnificent floral arch, framing the breathtaking view of the hills beyond. Guests in pastel dresses and smart linen suits mingled, sipping champagne from tall flutes. A string quartet played something soft and classical, the notes drifting on the warm afternoon breeze. It was a picture of serene, rustic elegance. It was a beautiful lie. I didn't park in the designated guest area down the road. I turned my car up the main driveway, the crunch of the gravel under my tires a discordant sound in the tranquil atmosphere. I stopped about halfway up, leaving the car angled slightly, an unmistakable assertion of presence. I got out, the charcoal gray of my suit a stark slash against the soft colors of the party. In my right hand, I carried the slim black briefcase. I didn't sneak in through a side gate. I walked directly onto the stone path that had been strewn with white rose petals, the path that was meant to be Jessica's aisle. My arrival acted like a stone dropped into a still pond. The ripples of awareness spread instantly. A man in a blue blazer paused mid-laugh, his eyes locking on me. A woman whispered to her companion, pointing with her champagne flute. Heads began to turn, one by one, a wave of confused and curious faces. The string quartet faltered, one of the violins screeching slightly off-key before the music petered out into an awkward silence. The wedding planner, Tiffany, stood near the back, her face going as white as the roses on the arch. Then my family saw me. They were all arranged at the front. My parents sat in the first row, my mother beaming, my father looking proud and magnanimous. Jessica stood under the floral arch with her groom, David, looking like a storybook princess in her white lace dress. Her smile was radiant, triumphant. When her eyes met mine, that smile froze, cracking like thin ice. My mother's face went from beatific pride to cold fury in a split second. My father's jaw tightened, his eyes darting around as if seeking an escape route. They knew. They knew I was not there to offer my congratulations. The officiant, a pleasant-looking man in his 60s, seemed to be the only one oblivious to the sudden, suffocating tension. He smiled broadly at the assembled guests. "Dearly beloved," he began, his voice amplified by a small microphone clipped to his lapel. "We are gathered here today, in this beautiful setting, to celebrate the union of Jessica Gable and David Vance." That was my cue. I began to walk forward. My heels clicked with a steady, unhurried rhythm on the stone path, the sound unnaturally loud in the dead silence. I walked past the rows of stunned guests, my eyes fixed on the front. Jessica's eyes were wide with a mixture of panic and disbelief. My mother made a slight move to stand, but I ignored her. I walked all the way to the front, stopping right beside the officiant. He looked at me, his welcoming smile faltering into confusion. I gave him a brief, polite nod before turning my gaze to the crowd. I took a deep, steadying breath, the scent of the thousands of roses now smelling like a funeral. "Excuse me," I said, my voice calm, clear, and carrying easily through the silent air. "I'm afraid there's been a terrible misunderstanding." A collective gasp went through the crowd. It was a soft, sibilant sound, like the wind rushing through dry leaves. Jessica recovered first, her shock curdling into rage. "Amelia, what in God's name do you think you're doing?" she hissed, her voice a venomous whisper. "You are ruining everything." My father started to rise from his chair. "Amelia, this is not the time or the place." I ignored them both. My audience was not my family. My audience was the 150 people they had gathered to witness their triumph. I was here to give them a different show. I took another small step forward, positioning myself so I could address everyone. "For those of you who don't know me," I began, my voice even and strong, projecting to the very back row. "My name is Amelia Gable. I'm Jessica's sister." I let that hang in the air for a moment, letting the guests connect me to the bride. "I'm sure you were all told that this magnificent house was a generous gift from my parents to the happy couple," I continued, my tone conversational, almost academic. "I'm sure you're all impressed by their incredible generosity. The problem is, that story is a complete fabrication." The murmurs started then, low and uncertain. I saw David, the groom, glance at Jessica, a flicker of confusion on his face. I raised my voice slightly to cut through the noise. "This house was not a gift. Because it was never my parents' to give away. I am the sole and legal owner of this property at 1140 Summit Ridge." I paused, letting the weight of that statement land. "And I did not give my consent for a wedding to be held here today." The murmurs exploded. I saw my Uncle Robert in the third row, his face grim, nodding slowly. I saw my Aunt Carol's jaw drop. I walked to the small ornate table that stood beside the officiant, the one meant to hold a unity candle or a sand ceremony vase. I placed my black leather briefcase on it and opened it with two decisive clicks that sounded like gunshots in the tense silence. "I know that's a serious accusation to make," I said, my voice hardening. "And I would never make it without proof." I reached into the briefcase and pulled out a stapled set of documents. I held the packet up high for everyone to see. "This is a copy of the deed for this property, filed with and certified by the county clerk's office, I announced. As you can see, I took a step toward the front row, holding it out so my parents and the Vances could see the page clearly. There is only one name listed under grantee: Amelia Gable. Then, I turned toward the videographer, a young man who looked like he wanted the earth to swallow him whole. I held the document steady, my hand not trembling in the slightest. "Make sure you get a clear shot of that," I said to him. His eyes widened, and he numbly zoomed in. I then turned back to the stunned crowd. "For anyone who doubts the authenticity of this document, don't worry. I brought more copies. I can pass them around." The carefully constructed fantasy of the day was shattering like glass. David took a half step away from Jessica, his handsome face now a mask of bewildered alarm. "Jess," he whispered, his voice cracking. "What is she talking about?" My father finally found his voice and his feet. He stood up, his face flushed a deep, mottled red. "Now, Amelia, this is just a family misunderstanding. We can discuss this privately." I turned my cold gaze on him. "A misunderstanding?" I asked, my voice cutting through his bluster like a razor. "There is no misunderstanding, Dad. Did you misunderstand the difference between my name and yours when you signed as a witness on my mortgage application? An application which clearly listed me as the sole borrower for a multi-million-dollar loan? Or did you misunderstand the property tax bill that was mailed to my apartment, assessed to my name?" He flinched as if I had physically struck him. He had no answer. He sank back into his chair, defeated. I turned back to my briefcase. The crowd was silent now, a captive audience to a drama far more compelling than a simple exchange of vows. They were watching the public demolition of a family's reputation. "A house like this isn't bought with wishes," I said, my voice ringing with the authority of absolute truth. I reached into the briefcase and pulled out the final, thickest document. It was a bound compilation of 3 years of my life, hundreds of pages of bank statements, wire transfer confirmations, and contractor invoices, held together with a simple clip. It was heavy in my hand. It was the weight of my work, my sacrifice. My father didn't promise my sister this house. He couldn't. I held the thick stack of papers up high. Because I paid for it. Every nail. Every wire. Every window. Every single landscaping stone and blade of grass. I have the receipts. I let my gaze travel over the crowd, over my stunned relatives, over the horrified faces of the Vance family, before finally landing on my sister. She stood frozen under the arch of wilting white roses, her face a ghastly chalky white. The radiant bride was gone. The charming, golden child had vanished. In her place was a thief, caught in the act. Her beautiful mask had melted away, revealing the terrified, entitled, and utterly exposed person beneath. Her lip trembled, her eyes darting around wildly, looking for a savior who wasn't there. I took a step toward her, my voice dropping but losing none of its lethal intensity. "This isn't your home, Jessica. It's mine. You're not a bride about to start her new life. You are a trespasser. And your party is over." The final, shattering blow didn't come from me. It came from the man standing beside her. David, his face pale with horror and public humiliation, finally turned to his bride-to-be. His voice was barely a whisper, but in the dead silence, everyone heard it. "Jessica, is this true?" Her silence was her confession. And in that silence, everything came crashing down. The implosion was immediate and catastrophic. It wasn't loud or violent. It was a quiet, social death. David stared at Jessica for one moment longer, his expression hardening from confusion to disgust. He took a deliberate step back, away from her, a gesture of severance so clear it was like a slap. Then he turned to his parents, who were already on their feet, their faces twin masks of thunderous rage. Mrs. Vance gave my mother a look of such profound contempt, I almost felt a flicker of pity for her. Almost. The Vances turned and began walking away, their exit signaling the end. That was the cue. Like a spell being broken, the guests began to move. There was a collective rustle of clothing, the scrape of chair legs on the lawn. They stood, not in a rush, but with a kind of grim, awkward purpose. They avoided looking at me. They avoided looking at my family. They clutched their purses and their programs and simply began to leave, a mass exodus from the scene of a social car crash. Their whispers were the funeral dirge for my family's reputation. Within minutes, the lawn was nearly empty. All that remained were the rows of vacant chairs and the wreckage of my family. My mother was the first to approach, her face contorted with a vicious fury. "How could you?" she spat, her voice low and trembling. "How could you do this to your sister? In front of everyone? You have destroyed this family." "No," I said, my voice devoid of all emotion. "You did. You did when you decided one daughter was a person and the other was a resource." My father came up behind her, his face ashen. He tried a different tactic. "Amelia, please. We can fix this. Your sister, she's heartbroken." I looked past them at Jessica, who was now weeping great, shuddering sobs, her perfect makeup running in black streaks down her pale face. They were not tears of remorse. They were the tears of a spoiled child who had finally been told no. "She's not heartbroken," I said coldly. "She's just embarrassed she got caught." I looked from my mother's furious face to my father's pleading one. "I want you out. All of you. Get out of my house." There was no fight left in them. My mother grabbed Jessica's arm, pulling her along. My father gave me one last broken look before turning and leading his weeping, ruined daughter away. I watched them go, the three of them, a sad, pathetic little parade of liars and thieves, until they disappeared around the side of the house. The silence they left behind was vast and absolute, broken only by the chirping of crickets and the awkward clatter of the caterers, who had begun to pack up their food with quiet efficiency. The wilting floral arch drooped sadly. A breeze rustled the empty chairs. I stood alone in the middle of it all. I had won. The victory was total. And yet, there was a hollow ache in my chest, the phantom pain of an amputation. To save myself, I had been forced to cut off a part of my own life. A figure came and stood beside me. It was Chloe. She didn't say, "I told you so," or "You were amazing." She just slipped her arm through mine, a silent, solid presence. We stood there for a long time, watching the caterers pack up the remnants of the wedding that never was. My phone vibrated in the pocket of my suit jacket. I pulled it out. The screen glowed with a single word: Dad. For 32 years, that name had triggered an immediate, conditioned response, a jolt of anxiety, a sense of obligation, a need to answer and please. I stared at the screen, at the name of the man who had offered my life's work to someone else like a party favor. My thumb hovered over the screen, over the green accept icon. Then, with a calm, deliberate movement, I slid my thumb to the right, over the red decline icon. The call ended. The screen went dark. It was a small, simple gesture. And it was the freest I had ever felt. 2 months later, the house was finally mine. Not just legally, but spiritually. The last ghosts of the wedding had been exorcised. The cloying scent of roses had been replaced by the aroma of fresh coffee and lemon furniture polish. The oppressive, staged perfection was gone, replaced by the comfortable, lived-in clutter of my life. My books overflowed from the shelves in the reading nook. A 1,000-piece puzzle of a Van Gogh painting was half finished on a card table in the corner of the great room. My favorite worn-out quilt was draped over the arm of the sofa. My art, abstract, colorful, and modern, hung on the walls. The house finally looked like its owner. It finally looked like me. Tonight, I was hosting my real housewarming. There were no caterers, no string quartet, no seating chart. About 15 people were scattered around the open living space and the deck. Chloe, a few colleagues from my firm who had become genuine friends, my neighbor from my old apartment building. The air was filled not with polite, stilted conversation, but with raucous, genuine laughter. The stereo played a mix of 90s hip-hop and indie rock. We were eating pizza from a stack of cardboard boxes on the marble island and drinking cheap, delicious red wine out of mismatched glasses. It was chaotic. And it was perfect. The fallout from the wedding that wasn't had been swift. David had called me a week later to offer a formal, mortified apology, both for his own gullibility and for Jessica's actions. He and his family had severed all ties. My uncle Robert had sent a certified letter, offering his legal services pro bono should my parents or sister attempt any further action. They hadn't. There had been only a vast, profound silence from them for 2 months. I had not reached out, and neither had they. The amputation was clean. Later in the evening, I found myself alone on the deck, leaning against the same iron railing. The night was cool and clear, the sky studded with a million tiny brilliant stars. I held a glass of wine and looked out at the dark, sleeping shapes of the hills. The peace I felt now was different from the one I'd felt that first day. That had been the fragile peace of accomplishment. This was the resilient peace of survival. It was a peace that had been fought for, defended, and won. It was scarred and tough and real. Chloe came and stood beside me, handing me a slice of pepperoni pizza on a paper plate. "You okay?" she asked softly. I looked away from the view and at the warm, fire-lit scene inside my house. I saw my friends laughing, arguing over music, stealing the olives off each other's pizza slices. I saw a home filled with light and love, a new foundation, built with better materials. I took a bite of pizza and smiled, a real, relaxed, and genuine smile. The hollow ache in my chest was gone, replaced by a quiet, steady warmth. "I'm home," I said. And for the first time, it was the absolute truth. And that's the end. I got my house, and more importantly, I got my life back, but it came at a cost. Thank you so much for following my journey from foundation to fallout. Now I have one final question for all of you, and I honestly need your advice on this. Let's just say a year from now, my phone rings. It's my mother crying, telling me that Jessica is a wreck and that they both want to talk, to try and apologize. What should I do? A. Hang up the phone and block their numbers for good. They made their bed, and they need to lie in it forever. B. Agree to meet them for one coffee, in a public place, just to hear what they have to say. Not to forgive, but to listen. Tell me what you think in the comments. Should I choose A or B? I want to know exactly what you would do in my shoes. I can't wait to read your opinions.